Shalom, my Hebrews and Shebrews. This is Oilfield Disciple. Welcome to our daily bread. Um, when we read last time, I kind of jumped chapters in Matthew because we're one chapter ahead in Psalms, and we were in Psalms 24, so I read Matthew 24, which is perfectly fine. That was a great message that God had for us. So today I'm going to read Genesis 24, and then I'm going to back up and read Matthew 23, and then we'll read Psalms 25 and Proverbs 14. And also notice we skipped the Proverbs. I had a lot on my mind Sunday when we read our last daily bread. So just bear with me as we're reading. You can read on your own or however you feel led. As long as we're reading this word and getting it in us, that's the key. We're in some trying times now, and may get tougher before it gets better. But we'll see. We'll just keep our eyes open, stay sober and vigilant, and allow the Holy Spirit to keep us filled and prepared. So I'm going to flip the camera around and we will do our daily bread. All right. Back at the windmills. Genesis 24. Sheet 24. Abraham had just buried Sarah, and we're moving forward. And Abraham was old, advanced in years, and Yahweh had blessed Abraham in every way. Abraham said to the oldest servant of his house, who ruled over all that he had, "Please put your hand under my thigh, so that I may make you swear by Yahweh, the Elohim of heavens and the Elohim of the earth, that you do not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but to go to my land and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac, Yitzhak." And the servant said to him, "What if the woman refuses to follow me to this land? Do I then take your son back to the land from which you came?" Abraham said to him, "Beware, lest you take my son back there. Yahweh Elohim of the heavens, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my relatives, and who spoke to me and swore to me, saying, to your seed I give this land. He sends his messenger before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there." There's a whole lot of reason why he doesn't want Isaac to go back there, back to the land of Canaan, because the idol worshippers um, were so intense that he didn't want his son to fall prey to that, and so he was very strict on how he wanted this done. To guard and protect. That's what we need to do. We need to guard and protect. Don't go in places that can tempt you. Verse 8, "And if a woman refuses to follow you, then you shall be released from this oath. Only do not take my son back there." Then the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. And the servant took 10 of his master's camels and left. For all his master's good gifts were in his hand, and he arose and went to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor. And he made his camels kneel down outside the city by a fountain of water at evening time, the time when women go out to draw water. And he said, "Yahweh Elohim of master Abraham, please cause her to meet before me this day and show loving commitment to my master Abraham. See, I am standing here by the fountain of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now let it be that the young woman to whom I say, please let down your jar to let me drink, and she says, drink, and let me water your camels too. Let her be the one whom you have appointed your servant Isaac, and let me know by this that you have shown loving commitment to my master." We have to be careful that we don't put out fleeces. In other words, that kind of like this. I'm going to do this, this, and this, looking for this, and if this happens, it has to be of God. We have to be careful of that today because I don't really think we're strong enough to see the difference and discern the difference a lot of times between what God's doing and what the enemy's doing, and what is of ourselves. But this guy here, the servant of Abraham, is so bolden in the Lord that he knows the Lord is going to do a work, and he has no doubt. And so, therefore, as he lays this down, he knows what he's going to look for after this, that it would be of God. But we have to be careful that we not do that. Um, without extreme discernment. So just a word of advice: think about it, and you do with it what you will. And in verse 15, and it came to be before he had ended speaking that see Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with a jar on her shoulder. And the young woman was very good looking, a maiden, no man having known her. That word known her is the same word that Jesus used when he says, "Depart from me, I never knew you." Same fashion. And she went down to the fountain, filled her jar, and came up. And the servant ran to meet her and said, "Please, let me drink a little water from your jar." And she said, "Drink, my master." And she hurried and let her jar down to her hand and gave him drink. And when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, "Let me draw water for your camels too, until they have finished drinking." And she hurried and emptied her jar into the trough, ran back to the fountain to draw water, and drew for all his camels. And watching her, the man remained silent in order to know whether Yahweh had prospered his way or not. It came to be when the camels had finished drinking that the man took a golden nose ring weighing half a shekel and two bracelets for her wrist weighing 10 shekels of gold, pretty good amount of money, and said, "Whose daughter are you? Please inform me, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" And she said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, Milcah's son, whom she bore to Nahor." And she said to him, "We have both straw and fodder enough, and room to spend the night." Um, we got room, we got you a bed, we'll even feed you here in a minute. And the man bowed down his head and worshipped Yahweh. And he said, "Blessed be Yahweh Elohim of my master Abraham, who has not forgotten or forsaken his loving commitment and his truth toward my master. As for me, being on the way, Yahweh led me to the house of my master's brothers." Then the young woman ran and informed those of her mother's house these matters. And Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. And Laban ran out to meet the man, ran out to the man to the fountain. It came to be when he saw the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrist, and when he heard the words of his sister Rebekah saying, "Thus the man spoke to me," that he went to the man and saw him standing by the camels at the fountain. He said, "Come in, O blessed of Yahweh. Why do you stand outside? I myself have prepared the house and a place for the camels." So the man came into the house while he unloaded the camels and provided straw and fodder for the camels and water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him, and set food before him to eat. But he said, "Let me not eat until I have spoken my word and said." And he said, "Speak on." He said, "I am Abraham's servant, and Yahweh has blessed my master exceedingly, and he has become great. And he has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold, and male and female servants and camels and donkeys. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when she was old, and he has given to him all that he has. And my master made me swear, saying, 'Do not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I dwell, but go to my father's house and to my relatives and take a wife for my son.' And I said to my master, 'What if the woman does not follow me?' But he said to me, 'Yahweh before whom I walk sends his messenger with you, and shall prosper your way, and you shall take a wife for my son from my relatives and from my father's house. Then when you go to my relatives, you are to be released from this oath, and if they do not give her to you, then you are released from my oath.' And this day I came to the fountain and said, 'Yahweh, Elohim of my master, Abraham, please.'" Let me reread that. "And this day I came to the fountain and said, 'Yahweh, Elohim of my master Abraham, please.'" if you are prospering the way in which I am going. See, I am standing by the fountain of water, and when the young woman comes out to draw water, and I say to her, please give me a little water from your jar to drink, and she says to me, drink, and let me draw for your camels too. Let her be the woman whom Yahweh has appointed for my master's son. I had not yet ended speaking in my heart. Then see, Rebekah was coming out with her jar on her shoulder. And she went down to the fountain and drew water. And I said to her, please let me drink. And she hurried and let her jar down from her shoulder and said, drink, and let me water your camels too. So I drank, and she watered the camels too. And I asked her and said, whose daughter are you? And she said, to the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. Then I put the nose ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrist, and I bowed my head and I worshipped Yahweh. And I blessed Yahweh Elohim of my master Abraham, who had led me in the true way to take the daughter of my master's brother for his son. And now, if you are going to show loving commitment and truth to my master, let me know. And if not, let me know, so that I turn to the right or I turn to the left. And Laban answered, Bethuel too, and said, the matter comes from Yahweh. We are not able to speak to you either evil or good. See, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be your master's son's wife, as Yahweh has spoken. It came to be, when Abraham's servant heard their words, that he bowed himself towards the earth before Yahweh. And the servant brought out ornaments of silver and ornaments of gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave costly gifts to her brother and to her mother. And he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night. When they arose in the morning, he said, let me go to my master. But her brother and her mother said, let the young woman stay with us a few days, at least 10, then you go. He said to them, do not delay me. Since Yahweh has prospered my way, let me go so that I go to my master. And they said, let us call the young woman and ask her. So they called Rebekah and said to her, are you going with this man? And she said, I shall go. So they let go Rebekah, their sister, her nurse, and Abraham's servant, and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, let our sister become the mother of thousands, of tens thousands, and let your seed possess the gates of those who hate them. And Rebekah and her young women arose, and they rode on the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and left. And Yitzhak came from the way of Beer Lahai Roi, for he dwelt in the south. And Yitzhak went out to meditate in the field of the evening, and he lifted his eyes and looked, and saw the camels coming. And Rebekah lifted her eyes, and when she saw Yitzhak, she dismounted from her camel, and she said to the servant, who is this man walking in the field to meet us? And the servant said, it is my master. So she took a veil and covered herself. And the servant told Yitzhak all the matters he had done. And Yitzhak brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife. He loved her. Thus Yitzhak was comforted after his mother's death. Whew! I forgot how long that chapter was. Um, Quite different than we operate today, huh? Quite different. If only we could turn our ways, and we could be so bold in the Lord that we would walk in his ways without question. I'm going to read Psalms, and then that's going to be our daily bread for today. Um, Feel free to read Matthew 23 today, because I'll go on to 25 tomorrow. Matthew 23 is Yeshua really rebuking the Pharisees. He gets pretty serious and gets on with it. See where we're at with time. We're going to read read Psalms 25. To you, O Yahweh, I lift up my being. O my Elohim, in you I put my trust. Let me not be ashamed. Let not my enemies exult over me. Indeed, let no one who waits on you be ashamed. Let those who are treacherous without cause be ashamed. Show me your ways, O Yahweh. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your ways of truth. And teach me, for you are the Elohim of my deliverance, my salvation. We better take heed, y'all, on this. On you I wait all the day. Remember, O Yahweh, your compassion and your loving commitments, for they are from everlasting. Do not remember the sins of my youth and my transgressions. According to your loving commitment, remember me, for your goodness' sake, O Yahweh. Good and straight is Yahweh. Therefore he teaches sinners in the way, just like you and me. He's bringing us back unto him. He guides the meek ones in right ruling and teaches the meek ones his way. All the paths of Yahweh are loving, committed, and truth to those who guard his covenant and his witnesses. For your name's sake, O Yahweh, you shall pardon my crookedness. Thou it is great. Who then is the man that fears Yahweh? He teaches him in the way he should choose. His life dwells in good, and his seed inherits the earth. The secret of Yahweh is with those who fear him, and he makes his covenant known to them. Now think about the story we just read, or the account we just read in Genesis. Can we become like that? Was Yahweh back to the old paths? Jeremiah 6. My eyes are ever toward Yahweh, for he brings my feet out of the net. Turn your face to me and show me favor, for I am lonely and afflicted. The distress of my heart have enlarged. Oh, bring me out of my distresses. Look on my affliction and my toil, and forgive all my sins. See how many of my enemies have become, and they hate me with a violent hatred. Oh, guard my life and deliver me. Let me not be ashamed, for I have taken refuge in you. Let integrity and straightness guard me, for I have waited for you. Redeem Israel, O Elohim, out of all his distresses. Whew. Man, I'm going to tell you what, this is speaking to me today. Hope it's speaking to you. When we guard Yahweh, when we guard Yahweh's way, just like the Psalm of David here, the Lord will show favor and lead us and guide us in his way to protect us, direct us. May not be in the flesh. We may die in this flesh, but we'll have everlasting life in the spirit. Rebellion is out of witchcraft. We either commit and lay down and surrender our lives to our Lord and Master Yahweh, or we rebel and we follow the guidelines of what Satan did. He rebelled, and we know his fate. Let us not rebel no more. If you're hearing this, I pray that you really diligently dig in and find out who the Lord Most High Yahweh is. We get that by the grace of what Christ, Messiah, Yeshua did on that cross. I've said it a bunch of times. If there is grace and mercy, there has to be a guideline for judgment, and judgment has to be true and righteous. Without standard, judgment, and truth, there cannot be grace and mercy. There would be no need for it. Psalm 51, verse 10, David says, "Please do not take the Holy Spirit from me." David had sinned a great sin. Let us all get back to the old paths. If we've got time, let's go ahead and read Proverbs 14. No, I said I'm going to skip Matthew 23 because I don't really feel like the rebuke of what the Pharisees are fixing to go through. I don't know. We'll see. My spirit's really stirred this morning. Proverbs chapter 14. Proverbs 14. Every wise woman has built her house, but the foolish breaks it down with her hands. He who walks in his straightness fears Yahweh, but he whose ways are crooked despises him. That's rebellion. And the mouth of a fool is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise guard them. Where there are no oxen, the crib is clean, but from the strength of an ox comes much increase. A trustworthy witness does not lie, but a false witness breathes out lies. A scoffer shall seek wisdom, but find none. But knowledge is swift to him who has understanding. Leave the presence of a foolish man, for you shall not perceive the lips of the knowledge. Don't hang around people that are going to just be silly. Don't listen to these wicked TBN pastors. The wisdom of the clever is to understand his way, but the folly of fools is deceit. Fools scoff at guilt, but among the straight there is delight. I read in Luke, was it Luke? Yeah, Luke 15, I believe, in my message um, the other day when Jesus was speaking. It talked about the Pharisees scoffing at him. The heart knows its own bitterness, and no stranger shares its joy. The house of the wrong is destroyed, but the tent of the straight flourishes. There is a way which seems right to a man, but in its way, but in it, but its end is the way of death. Think about Paul. He thought he was doing right on the road to Damascus. It was by the grace of Messiah to change his ways. Otherwise, he was headed for death. Even in laughter, the heart is pain, and the end of that joy is heaviness. The backslider in heart is satisfied with his own ways, but a good man is satisfied from his. The simple believes every word, but the clever one watches his step. The wise fears and turns away from evil. Yeah. Um, when we see people speaking blasphemies, and turn away from them. But a fool rushes on and is reckless. He who is impatient acts foolish. And a man who plans wickedness is hated, and the simple shall inherit folly, but the clever are crowned with knowledge. The evil one shall bow before the good, and the wrong one at the gates of the righteous. The poor is hated even by his own neighbor, but the rich has many friends. He who despises his neighbor sins, but he who shows favor to the poor, oh, blessed is he. Do not those who plan evil go astray? But loving commitment and truth are to those who plan good. In all labor there is profit. But to talk of the lip leads only to poverty. The crown of the wise is their wealth. The folly of fools is folly. A true witness saves lives, but he who breathes out lies is a betrayer. And the fear of Yahweh is strong trust, and his children have a place of refuge. The servant in the account we read in Genesis, strong trust that Yahweh will do what he says he will do. The fear of Yahweh is a fountain of life, to turn away from the snares of death. And a multitude of people is a king's splendor, but in the lack of people is the ruin of a prince. He who is patient has great understanding, but he who is short of spirit exalts folly. A healthy heart is life to the body, but envy is rottenness to the bones. He who oppresses the poor reproaches his maker, but he who esteems him shows favor to the needy. By his own evil doing, the wrong is thrust down, but the righteous has a refuge in his death. Wisdom rests in the heart of him who has understanding, and even among fools it becomes known. Righteousness exalts a nation, and loving commitment to the people is sin. The sovereign's delight is toward a wise servant, but his wrath is towards him who causes shame. Yeah, read Matthew 23 on your own. I've got a lot I'm just praying on, and I'm looking at a lot of things right now. So um, we're living in quite extraordinary times, I believe. This is really interesting watching what's going on. I just pray that you would keep your head on a swivel, stay sober, stay vigilant, get in the shelter of the Most High. Let us learn to trust in Yahweh in all our ways. God be blessed, be encouraged in all ways, be frustrated. This is the Oilfield Disciple, and I will catch you on the next ride.